How's it going, everyone? Mufara here. Welcome to Heliopolis Radio. I hope you enjoy the content. Peace and blessings to the people. How's it going, everyone? Mufara here. Welcome to Heliopolis Radio. Thank you for tuning in. I am hoping that you've all had a blessed week thus far, regardless of what you're doing or what your objectives are. In today's podcast of Retrospect, we'll be talking about the film 2001: A Space Odyssey, directed by Stanley Kubrick. So, Stanley Kubrick is one of my favorite directors of all time. He's late now, but in his time, he produced, in my opinion, some of the most insightful movies that you could ever watch. And for the time in which he developed and directed these movies with the limited technology that they had, in quotation marks, he made some really pretty goddamn good films. So, another one of his famous films, I don't know if any of you have watched it, it's Full Metal Jacket. It's about basically about the Vietnam War and some of the, I guess you can say, the ugly realities behind it. And Stanley Kubrick was always renowned for his films bringing out kind of the ugly truths or the darker or more unspoken of things, themes that are prevalent in society today. So 2001 Space Odyssey, I'm trying to not spoil the plot or anything, so I have to be really careful with my words here. It's basically, it's set in a time, it actually is over a certain time frame, it's a time period, but it begins at actually the beginning of, I guess you can say, humanity, going back to our primal ancestors, the Neanderthals, and basically some strange object falls from the sky, right? And these apes or ape men basically were amused by this object, and they actually spent a night sleeping around this object, and then the next morning this object had somehow imbued our ancestors with a enhanced form of intelligence. So instead of fighting amongst themselves and killing each other in barbaric manners, this object seemingly incited a different level of intelligence within these I guess you can call them proto-humans or early humans. And it basically goes on that from that point onwards, from that point after interacting with this monolith, that's what they're called, it actually goes through and it shows you a cycle and evolution of man from that point in time. All the technological advancements, all the societal advancement, the infrastructure and everything. And it's all centered around this mysterious monolith. And you could, everyone has different opinions about what it is and what it's not. You'd have to watch the movie yourself to form an opinion about it. But the assumption is that it's an alien object, and this object basically had a important role in us being who we are today. Maybe there are a lot of interpretations towards the film, but that's the basic general assumption. And so the story basically evolves around how our evolution is basically centered around returning to this monolith that started us off on this path. So this object lands on Earth, and then basically in pursuit of this object, subconsciously, it's not even a conscious thing, because after these apes woke up the next morning, they walked away from this monolith, and then that was it. They never came back to it. They just took their intelligence and they formed society as it is. So unconsciously, all our developments, from the development of space travel and everything, and all these technological advancements allow humans, in quotation marks, to travel to the moon, right? And so upon traveling to the moon, they discover this monolith, right? And then this monolith becomes a subject of scientific inquiry, in quotation marks. And so basically, people, human society, through a collective effort, they try figure out, exactly what this thing is. And so I'm not going to go too into it, but basically they take a long voyage into deep space to attempt to maybe find the location from which this object could have been sent. And so, the basic thing is that there's a monolith, and this monolith landed on Earth almost like about 1 million years ago, and it had a pivotal role in our societal development and evolution. And so, coming into the themes of it, though, it's really interesting to see how they have a different take on evolution, right? Because when you look at humanity as a whole, we are, I think there's a certain gap, a 200,000 year gap, in which, in comparison to our primeval ancestors, there was like a between the, I don't know what it's called, this is the Homo habilis, and then there's a Homo sapien. There's like a 200,000 evolutionary gap. I don't know if I got the names right, specifically the taxonomy for those, sorry, but it may be something else. But yeah, there's a 200,000 year evolutionary gap in which we developed our prefrontal cortex at an unprecedented rate that is not kind of like accounted for. Some people say it was an accelerated evolution, some people say this and that. But this movie kind of interestingly alludes to, maybe some, external, influence, celestial influence that might have, incited this. And so I know everyone's really sensitive to conspiracy theories and everything, so I'm not going to get into that. But yeah, the movie basically has an interesting take on how our evolution may have been, definitely been, essentially, it could have been attributed to something outside of this planet. And so what it also does really well is it shows the nature of technology and man's relationship to it. Especially, I think this is really good because this movie was done 1967, but it's so relevant to today. It's incredible. A lot of the, I can't go into it, but a lot of the technological advancements you see in the movie for that time seem completely outlandish. And you would think, well, why would someone in the 60s been even thinking like this? But then what they actually portray in that film is actually present today. So it's really interesting to see how, this film is so, it's almost like it was predictive in many ways because, some of the technological advancements, for instance, there was like a supercomputer, right? And we all know that IBM have officially developed, I think they have the fastest quantum supercomputer right now in the world. And ironically enough, in the film, the technological advancements in that film were from IBM. And so I don't know if maybe this was just how the director had some type of, he had some precognition of what was to be, or he was just really damn good at guessing things. But yeah, so basically, in the terms of the relationship of man and technology, it shows a quick shift in how man quickly become irrelevant and incapable in terms of processing power and actually handling the technology that they have. And I'm not going to go too much into the plot and everything, but basically what ends up being apparent is that the technology that, has been created is clearly too overwhelming, or it's way ahead of what the human mind is actually capable of handling at that time. So you start to see those issues come up and those themes, and that's very relevant today because we're seeing it now in our world, which is largely digitalized and largely less, it involves less manpower than it did before, simply because machines have a way of essentially doing things at a much more efficient and a much more calculated way than human workforce does. And so that was a major theme in that movie, and it became a serious issue. And the way the author does it is in a very, very I don't want to say it in a dark sense, but it's a very eerie and sinister type of way, because it shows you how, human evolution, the way it's happened and the speed that they portrayed in the film, it almost seems as if it was too much for society to handle. And so, that thing, when something arrives before it's not meant to, it becomes like a destructive thing. There's a famous saying about it: when something arrives too early, something that's good can actually be something that's terrible. And there are many instances where we can even draw those parallels in our own lives, right? So, maybe if you get a job promotion before you're fully, committed to something. I don't know. It's a very trivial example, but yeah, they basically show that throughout the film, that's a major thing, that, whatever this monolith did to people or did to these things, yes, it gave them intelligence, but it gave them a level of intelligence that they weren't capable of fully grasping and mastering. And so you can even see that despite like humans' evolution through time, the one thing that they haven't been able to overcome is their own compulsions, right? And one of those main compulsions is ignorance. There's always this marvel and wonder of, oh, you can do this and oh, you can do that. But there's a level of ignorance that you see in the film, that you can create these great things, but you understand the implications of what you've just created, right? So it's a really good film. I recommend you guys watch it. I mean, some of the things that they were portraying at that time, and for the level of accuracy, and it's crazy. It's, I think George Lucas, the director of Star Wars or whatever, he actually called it the greatest sci-fi film of all time. And I can see where he gets that thought form, because when you see how Stanley Kubrick portrays the nature of sci-fi, and he brings such I don't know, it's just a very, very concrete, comprehensive, grounded type of interpretation into the nature of technology and our relationship to it, and our relationship to things beyond. I mean, if you watch the film, I won't get into it, it gets much deeper than that. It's beyond just evolution, it's beyond technology, it's really an existential question, right? And it's also good, to just kind of, for those who have minds that like to entertain, different ideas and everything, it's an interesting one. But more importantly, the way it reflects society. And I think Stanley Kubrick's films are very potent reflections of society, and he was really renowned for that. I mean, I know this is going off track, but his movie Full Metal Jacket, that was a very powerful insight into the I'm actually going to do it in one of the upcoming podcasts, into the real ugly nature behind war and what it really represents, the psychological toll that it takes on people. And it gets even much deeper than that. A lot of the painful truths behind some of the, aspects of our society that are prevalent today and still relevant. He did these films. I mean, I know he passed, I think late in the 80s he passed, but in his time, he really, all his films were so concise and so blunt and so, kind of really not raw with the truth, but they were very authentic with truth. So I recommend you watch 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's a really great film. Excuse me there. It's a really great film, and you will definitely, it's a bit long, it's like 2 hours 30 minutes, maybe even 3 hours, because of the whole timelines that they're trying to go through. But it's really good acting, and the musical score, and the cinematography, the way he uses certain scenes to create, he always has this like kind of gloomy feel to the scenes, and he uses coloring and lighting in ways that it basically is a very, very it really gets to you. But more importantly, it's kind of the themes that it discusses. And I think, especially in the society we are currently living in today, it's important, man. It's an important reflection of maybe some of the questions you need to ask yourself. We're proud of a lot of these achievements, but do we understand the implications, and do we even know how to handle it? And then it brings to the question, is this is something that we are not handling properly because it's been given to us at a stage when we haven't even fully been able to hone and master our intelligence? Or is it just one of those things which is now part of our natural course of evolution? It's one of those things, like something random pops up, and like nature, it has to resolve itself in its own natural way. But thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I will be hopefully doing a short update podcast. If there are any gardeners or growers that are interested in a garden type podcast, please let me know. I've been looking to kind of get that going. And peace and blessings to the people. Thank you.